Hey there, I'm Marcy McDonald, the Online Course Doctor, here to help you improve your online courses by unpacking what works, what doesn't work, and what you can do to make them better. Today, we continue our interview series with Dr. Stephen Ressler. You've been an academic professor for years, but you're very entertaining, engaging, and successful teaching online. So what do you do differently online? You know, what are the things that have been hard to adjust to, but what are the things you like better, perhaps, about teaching online rather than in person?
Great question. When I was teaching at West Point for 21 years, I had the great luxury of always teaching in small classes. We never had more than 18 students in a class, with very bright, energetic, engaged students. And so I was able to develop a teaching style that was extremely interactive. Ask a lot of questions, have a lot of discussion, have a lot of direct interaction between the professor and the students. That was always a source of great joy and energy for me as a teacher. And so, of course, the first time I had to teach in a dark studio in front of a series of cameras where the only other people in the room were the cameramen, and they could not possibly be active participants in the process, I had some culture shock, and I really had to make some significant adjustments to the challenges of not having a live audience there to provide verbal and nonverbal feedback and to be able to maintain some sort of dialogue. As always, you know, the great courses provided some great teachers to me to help me through that process. And you were one of them, by the way, Marcy. And I'm always thankful for the great guidance you provided me all along the way in developing the special skill set associated with doing online education. And I remember one of the things that my great courses mentors taught me was just because there's no one there doesn't mean you can't interact with them. One tool to use is the rhetorical question. You know, at the point when normally I would ask a student a question, I could ask the same question rhetorically, and I can even pause so that the audience in the online course has an opportunity to stop and reflect on that question before I then proceed and say, well, let's think about this, or here's a potential answer to that question. So the rhetorical question is one great way to make the class feel engaging, even though there isn't actually somebody there responding to the question. Another I found quite natural, a technique that turned out to be a natural, good fit with the way I had always taught, because I'm a firm believer in teaching in an interactive way when you're with a live audience. As a routine aspect of my lesson planning process, I always consciously stop to think about points in a class when I anticipated students would ask questions. You know, as we work through the development of some complex concept, there are inevitable places when logical questions come to mind. And I always try to anticipate those because there was a good chance that some student in the group was going to ask, and I wanted to have a good, coherent answer prepared to be able to respond when that question came up. Well, I realized that same phenomenon is completely applicable to online education. As I'm preparing a lecture, I find that there are logical places when the audience, having heard what they've heard, are going to have questions. And so it works very nicely within the lecture to say, now at this point, you're probably wondering X. Great question. Let's talk about it. And then I can go on to answer that question. So in effect, just as the rhetorical question mimics the process of me asking questions to my students, this technique, anticipating their questions, stating their questions on their behalf, and then responding to them is analogous to the normal situation that occurs in class when individual students have questions. So that has worked very well for me. And then the third way that I've responded to the challenge associated with teaching to an empty room and trying to be engaging in the same way that I'm engaging when I'm teaching to a live audience is to pay very careful attention to the development of my lecture scripts and to my own delivery, to try to have both of them be in the most conversational style possible, right? So I always teach from a lecture script when I'm teaching online. And I do that because I found that it works better for me. the spontaneity that many professors are able to achieve in online courses is just not a style that works well for me, because I'm teaching a lot of technical material with a lot of dense information, and I need to do it relatively efficiently. And so I find working from a script is the best way to do that for me. But to make it sound like I'm not speaking from a script, I write the script in a very conversational way. I include all the contractions in the script and all the pauses, and I annotate the script so I know which part of the sentence to put emphasis on, so it sounds as conversational as possible. And then I practice many times to ensure that my delivery comes across as being as natural and as conversational as possible. And I think that's really critical in online education, because we want that audience to feel as though we are speaking to them directly, personally, and the conversational personal tone is really a vital component of achieving that end. And so that's been another really important technique that I've used. You asked also, are some aspects of teaching online better than teaching in the face-to-face mode in the classroom? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Number one reason I love teaching online is I don't have any grading to do. But the other thing, especially with respect to demos, to demonstrations and the use of physical models in class, online education provides substantial advantages. I did a lot of demos when I was teaching at West Point, but I could do those effectively in part because I was always teaching in a small classroom with a small group of students. If you're teaching to a group of 100 students, particularly if it's in a classroom where all the seating is at the same level, doing demonstrations is close to impossible, because the students in the back row can't possibly see what you're doing, at least if unless the demonstration is extremely large in size. So, but online, that problem goes away. You can have both a broad shot that shows me performing the demonstration, and you can have tight shots that show the details of the manipulation up much closer than any student sitting in a classroom could possibly see. You can do instant replays to re-emphasize the critical phenomenon that just occurred. You can slow it down, so if it's something that occurred quickly, you can see it actually play out, whereas if you observed it in real time, you couldn't possibly see it. So there's all sorts of enhancements to demonstrations that can occur in the online environment that can't possibly happen in a physical classroom. There's also great potential for other kinds of special effects. In my last two Great Courses lecture series, we worked up a really cool methodology for doing whiteboard animations, where I would draw sketches on the whiteboard in real time. And in practice, there were all sorts of production issues associated with me actually sketching on the whiteboard in real time. So we really simulated that and sped it up so that it wouldn't take too much time from the lecture. And it ended up being a very, very powerful effect that greatly enhanced and added a lot of variety to the lectures. And again, this is the sort of thing that couldn't possibly have been done in a live environment. Reflecting back on what I just talked about with respect to challenges, the final great advantage of teaching online is the ability to work from a script, the ability to plan out your lecture at a much higher level of detail, to know precisely what you're going to say, to make sure that all the information is communicated precisely, correctly, that all the little nuances that you want to get across can be delivered accurately. Where if you're delivering it in an ad hoc mode in a live classroom, you're much more likely to forget something or to misstate something, or to inadvertently leave out a critical detail. And so the ability to do a scripted performance in the online mode, as long as you figure out a way to do it as naturally as possible, really provides the potential for a much higher level of quality in the transmission of information.
It really can take your teaching to such a higher level than you can do in person. It's pretty amazing, really, when you think about it. So we've got just a couple minutes left. I'm going to skip over one of our questions because I really want you to answer this. You have done a course recently called Do-It-Yourself Engineering, which is less specifically about engineering. Like your very first course was about engineering. Then we had the ancient architecture and engineering behind that, but this is do-it-yourself engineering, which is the DIY crowd is huge. So I'm wondering what distinguishes this from your other courses, and who will benefit from it, or just plain enjoy it?
Oh, great. Thanks for asking. I'm always happy to do a shameless promotion of my great courses in general, and this one in particular, because this was by far the most challenging of the 4 courses that I've done for the great courses, and in many ways the most rewarding. I think it ultimately proved to be the most creative application of online education of all the courses we put together, and I'm really quite proud of the way it turned out. So in my previous 3 great courses lecture series, as we've already noted, I do an awful lot of physical models and demonstrations, always to illustrate key learning points with respect to how physical technological systems operate. The fundamental difference with this course is that the models and demonstrations are the central focus of the course. What we did was to concoct 17 real-world projects that involve the design and construction of, in most cases, models or small-scale physical systems that are entirely analogous to the corresponding full-scale systems. So, for example, one of the projects is to design and build a cardboard skyscraper that's capable of carrying a 100-pound load. One project is to design a wooden mechanical clock. One is to design a hydraulically powered mechanical arm, a backyard suspension bridge, a radio-controlled blimp, a whole series of really fun projects that are within the capabilities of the average viewer with, moderate DIY skills. But the central focus is not so much the building of the project, but rather the application of math, science, and technology to design that project in order to meet a specified set of project requirements. So the cardboard tower must be able to carry 100 pounds, and the course carries you through the process of doing some rudimentary basic level structural engineering so that you know that this tower will carry 100 pounds before you ever build it. And then finally we go into the workshop and we cut cardboard and glue things together in order to create the tower that we have designed. But the focus is much more on the design process than it is on the actual construction. It's a great experience. It's a great opportunity to see how real world engineers think and how they put their skills to work in order to create the technologies that surround us in our everyday lives. Just to show you an example, here's my mechanical clock, which you might not be able to see too closely here, but you can see it has all the appropriate gearing. It's a pendulum clock, which operates in this manner, and you can see how the gears turning will ultimately cause the entire system to work properly.
Personally, now I feel like building a clock. But so thanks for sharing that, Steve. Well, before we wrap up, do you have any other words of wisdom for online course creators?
I think a key point that online course creators should always keep in mind is that the delivery of instructional content online has incredible potential for breadth of impact far beyond what in-class face-to-face instruction can, just because the audience is so much larger and the potential impact is so much greater. But with that potential for greater impact comes greater responsibility. If you're going to deliver course content, especially if it's in a persistent form that's going to be out there on the internet for an extended period of time, I believe you have an obligation to deliver a higher level of quality than would be the case when you're delivering instruction face-to-face with students in that sort of ephemeral environment of the classroom. So it really is incumbent upon us as online content deliverers to go the extra mile, to achieve a higher level of content material, a higher level of rigor, a higher level of polish and enthusiasm, and of course, a higher level of the application of models and demonstrations to provide dramatic educational impact when teaching about physical concepts like engineering.
Steve, thank you for saying that, because it's actually why I refocused my business to work with people who are truly dedicated to creating a corner of excellence in the online course world. We need more people like you. So thank you for that and for your work. So friends, be sure to check below the video for a link to Steve's course, Do-It-Yourself Engineering, and of course, check out all his other courses and get them all. They're wonderful. So don't forget to sign up for weekly insightful guidance and tips from me, yours truly, your online course doctor. I'll see you next time.